Adderite, god of games, back at the helm. This is Chapter 2 Part 6 of The Land Chooses Its Heroes. The name of this part of the story is Enter the Harlequin. Nothing to do with Harley Quin from Batman, if that was what you were thinking. Nobody cosplaying Daddy's a little slut or nothing. Sorry, you could just slip out if you need to. Okay, you still here. Good. To catch you up, in Part 5, the boys went to a bar to find a ship's captain or a forger to get themselves out of the country. Alright, see you at the end. As the assembled party moved out of the bar, the glass-paned window broke as a body sailed through it. "You're not gonna tell me you don't miss this," Arkin said to Canydell with half a smile. Canydell smiled back, obviously feeling some measure of excitement from the exchange, but as of now, not quite ready to admit it. As they moved further down the docks away from the brawl, Arkin spoke to the mysterious, dark-haired woman. "So, you have a way out of Kane, out of Lorelei? I mean, best you don't lie," said Arkin, who brushed loose fabric away from his gun holsters to show he wouldn't like it, and she would like it even less. "Yes, I know many a captain up and down these docks, and I have all the documentation you need to move past the blockade as a legitimate cargo ship, if the ship doesn't have that. If Grambling Maddox's army is anything, it's at least organized and reasonable enough to allow legitimate commerce to commence." You'd think that if his army has this region surrounded, he wouldn't allow for goods to go in and out, Canydell said in a tone that asked a question. "Grambling isn't like that, never was. One of the most orderly dwarves I've met, in fact," Ebo said. "You know General Maddox?" Alune said to the dwarf with curiosity. "Yes, we both lived in Groomcorn. He wasn't my best friend by any stretch, but we knew each other," Ebo clarified and made sure not to make a big deal out of it. "So, you say you have forgeries that could get a boat out of Keene," said a smaller voice that came from the ground. Everyone craned their heads in confusion, looking for the voice without a body. Arkin's ears gently stood at attention, and his pistol clicked until it found resistance on something unseen. "Oh, I'm sorry," said the voice. The gnome from the bar appeared from thin air, the barrel of a gun pressed to his forehead like it were connected with glue. "I'm Captain Wakini Cracklin," he said while gleefully extending his hand to Arkin, who hadn't lowered his weapon yet. Canydell pushed Arkin's gun down slowly, which prompted Captain Wakini to go on. "I sometimes forget I'm a captain, only had a boat for a few years. I'm a traveling bard. Well, most of my crew are, in fact. My first mate, Deuce, is a brilliant actor," said the colorful gnome, motioning to a gaunt, brownish-red minotaur. The horned bullman nodded to the assembled party from a few paces away. "The way I see it, you owe me one," said Wakini, looking to Pisces. "You guys need a boat, and I need papers to get out of here without a hassle." The gnome redirected his gaze to Arkin and the others. "You could try your luck with a legitimate cargo ship, and get them to take the tremendous risk of letting you on board to get their ship confiscated or killed. Or you all could just take the path of least resistance." "Are you sure you can cover the forgeries?" said Ebo. "I'll give you 70% odds," shot back Wakini. Ebo nodded as if he were convinced, but seeing he gambled with everything, even his life, the others weren't instantly on board. "My forgeries are good, but I'm not coming with you," said Pisces. "The hell you aren't," said Arkin. "You sell us something bogus, and if we don't get killed, we have to search around and find you." "Can we at least see this boat of yours?" Canydell asked pragmatically before he bothered with making further plans. "Yeah, sure. You'll be able to easily see my ship. Maybe from here," said Wakini. Which one is it? Asked Canydell. Wakini pointed to the docks, and it was in fact easily spotted. The boat had red and white swirls on it, and a very prominent centerpiece of a female jester. Arkin closed his eyes and laughed hard. "What are we looking at?" said the dogfolk, wheezing from waves of amusement. Wakini didn't bother reacting to Arkin's dismissive behavior. This was the way he moved through life. Disarm with a smile, make a new friend, and if you had time, gain their full respect later. "It's the Harlequin. Home sweet home." "I love it. There is absolutely no way in hell I would have seen that coming in a million years," said Ebo, respecting the variety of randomness. Pisces shook her head. "Your boat will get flagged immediately." "It absolutely will. But look at it. You can't say we're not entertainers. All we need are the credentials to say we're expected somewhere other than in Lorelei, so we can leave this region without scrutiny," said Wakini. "I'm curious how you got through the first time," Canydell asked, gazing over the truly unique design. "Well, we did some bullshitting, and the Echo River changed direction in our favor, so we lost them," Wakini explained. "So you could potentially be a fugitive," said the half-elf Alune. "Well, technically, we would have had to have been captured and escaped to be fugitives. We were never convicted of a crime, so I think the more apt term would be high-priority target," said the well-manicured Minotaur. "Come on up. We love guests. We may be absolute shit as sailors, but we party like demons," said Wakini. As the gnome approached the boat, a man in a bandana lowered a plank onto the dock. Well, if it ain't the luckiest captain in all of Everin," the crewman said in a patronizing tone. Wakini smiled. "You're goddamn right." After the party walked onto the deck, Pisces said, "That sounded a lot like an insult at your expense." "Yeah, the crew does that because I suck as a captain. Everyone knows it. I won this boat in a card game. And most of the crew aren't really seamen, just out-of-work actors, musicians, bards, writers. You get the point. I mean, we just figured out what starboard and port was a few weeks ago." "I'm not sure I want to ride with you, Captain," said Pisces. "You will, and I'm not going to say you owe me for not telling everyone you were cheating at that card game, but I'm not saying that. I get the impression you've burned a lot of bridges, so why don't you consider this little jaunt out of town to be a fun little vacation until the heat dies down?" "Here's the bigger and more important question," Arkin spoke to Pisces. "How much faith do you have in your abilities?" "A lot," she came back. "And prove it," Arkin goaded. Half of the crew were dancing on the deck, doing something like a rehearsed routine. Ebo was so moved by the gesture, he joined in, sloppily but happily. "Come on!" the jovial dwarf motioned to Canydell. The blacksmith smiled and decided, what the hell? When you were on an adventure, you had to take the moments of levity when you got them. One moment you're enjoying a drink with friends, the next you're split in two by an undead knight. He danced with the crew that seemed to be happy to have them. A few of the crew that were off to the sides joined into the impromptu event as if things like this were commonplace on this ship. Wakini smiled and joined in. He had amazing dexterity in his feet. "Hey, red-haired lady, I think the easiest lie is to just say you all are performers that are part of the crew," said Wakini. Pisces nodded, then walked away, looking for wherever the captain's quarters were. The gnome captain didn't care in the least that a card-carrying thief was wandering his ship freely. Let her steal. Possessions meant very little to him anyways. Arkin leaned on the mast and smoked while Canydell and Ebo fraternized with the crew. "You're not going to dance? Are you too stoic for that?" said Alune. "Not really. Just no good. I don't need to dance to find my happy place. Now that the gang is back together, I've found it. These days have been really good days, he said while releasing a plume of smoke. Alune nodded, not having the same nostalgia for the road, seeing she hadn't been on it long. What are you in it for? Arkin asked the half-elf. She smiled, but took a bit too long to answer for Arkin. That answer should have been the easiest one ever asked, the dog folk said calmly. Alune searched her feelings, and he felt that Arkin was correct, though she had no intentions of telling him that. The half-elf woman thought to say money, but ultimately she had no idea how she would spend it even if she got it. So it felt like more a thing you said to convince yourself it was worth it than a true ambition. She didn't even respect people that hoarded money just to hoard it, but didn't use their wealth. And if she managed to obtain any, she was doomed to be one of those people. Ebol and Canydell got to know the crew in a few hours. Though they hadn't yet spoken of payment, or if they had chose to break through the blockade together, it was obvious they were enjoying this more than the bar. After day transitioned to night, their crew was doing a rendition of The Last Stand of the World Eater in the form of a play. A 7-foot half-orc played the part of Onara the elven blade singer, while a halfling in fake cat ears played the part of Silver the tabaxi. A human man played the part of the gnome priest to the faceless god, kept crackling, even though there were several gnomish actors on the ship. Pisces emerged from the captain's quarters with a yellowed sheet of paper. She did a sharp whistle which halted the performance for a moment. Wakini, Ebo, Canydell, Arkin, and Alune followed the woman with the red tips to the quiet chamber she had been toiling away in. This should do it, the woman said with confidence, smiling at her work. Canydell took the parchment carefully and looked it over. She forged an official seal of the Commissioner of Keen, Lorna Bobbitt. It spoke of the boat in question on the humble mission of mercy to entertain. It mentioned each of their names, or names that were close enough to theirs to pass. This is really good, said Canydell. I stand by my work, but even if they do believe you, you're not shipping or aiding Keen in their defense. They could easily not care and impound this vessel anyways, said Pisces. I doubt that would happen. I know Gremlin Maddox, a megalomaniac maybe, but not a complete warmonger. I truly believe that if we can convince him we are Arctis and not refugees from Lorelei, he wouldn't do that, said Ebo, as if he completely believed it. And you're acting like his army is him. Sure, they may have a core mission statement of just taking what they want and not gobbling up everything for the sake of it. But sometimes all of this comes down to who's the man in charge at the scene, Arkin rebutted. We'll have to cross that bridge when we get there and hope that whoever it is that may or may not greet us has the same impartial nature as Gremlin Maddox. My vote is, let's try it, said Canydell. Agreed, Ebo chimed in. Arkin nodded as if it were good enough. And I am also in agreement, Wakini said. Pisces smiled and said, Excellent. Then there is the small matter of payment. Well, my payment is back at the poker table, so you can go and collect that if you want, Wakini said, making very sure she realized just how much money he lost to safeguard her life. Pisces wanted to say something about it, but ultimately all the gnome had to do was yell loud enough and draw the patrons of the Echo's Kiss attention to them, and she was on the run again, getting absolutely nothing from him or these other adventurers. 25 gold, Arkin said to Pisces. If I wasn't expected to go on this expedition with you, I'd be completely okay with that amount, but seeing that I am, I need at least double that, she said. Arkin tossed her a coin pouch that chinked with the sound of money. That's 25, and you get another 25 when we leave the boat to get out of Maddox's occupied territory. Pisces nodded. This is great. We'll be off as soon as they finish up their play. The crew and the rest sat in rapt attention until the very last scene of the reenactment, where Kenny shed a tear when Tarek, that played his cousin, seemingly was going to die after sacrificing himself to the will of the faceless god. And Omar, the hobgoblin, played the female eldritch knight Gamu, who threw him into the World Eater's mouth. It was a true display of gnomish excellence. Oddly enough, Canydell, Ebo, and Arkin, being seekers, were very interested in the events of the gnomish seeker Kip Cracklin, who supposedly harnessed the power of the faceless god to drive back the influence of an otherworldly god-killing destroyer. They three were followers of the faceless god and loved to hear accounts of the power's direct intervention. The Echo River was different from most rivers in Everin because its currents changed for no discernible reason. The river was chaotic and made violent mood swings, frequently and suddenly. The downside of the Echo River was that if it wasn't moving in your favor, you had no choice but to drop anchor and pray that it held. But on the upside, if you were in the river's good graces, you could get where you were going 10 times faster than you would expect. As luck would have it, the Echo was in their favor later that night, so they set off. The waters were unusually calm, more gentle than it tended to be. Arkin found himself slightly concerned with this ship of performers' seafaring credentials, but Ebo told him, even if they were inept, it wouldn't be a long trip before they made it out of Lorelei. The three seekers opted to stay out on the deck this night, even though the navigator, Bouncer Bailey, a failed novelist, advised them against it, seeing that at any moment the current could shift and toss someone who was unaware off the side. The Echo had claimed even the most proficient swimmers. Those that were lucky tended to fare better than those that were skilled when the river was at its most unforgiving. Elune walked out of the bow of the ship and sat next to the three friends. They were laid out in sleeping bags. Canydell was asleep, and Arkin was in a trance of half consciousness and half not. Elune had been thinking about what Arkin had said earlier and hoped to ask him why he did what he did. In the moment, it never occurred to her to do so. As she moved to go back down below, Ebo spoke up. "Did you want something?" Elune smiled and thought to say no, but there was something so earnest and even about the dwarf's voice. She sat back down. "I wanted to know why you do it," said the half-elf woman. "What's that?" Ebo asked for the sake of clarification. "Adventure." "Oh, that," he said with a smile. "I did it because it was something special. The faceless god saved my life when I was very young," Ebo said, pausing to see if Elune cared enough to know more before he dove into a long story. The half-elf woman didn't flinch. She sat there attentively. "I was with my father on a mission caravanning to Sparrow. He's a merchant. We got attacked by a pack of gnolls. Quite a few dwarfs died in the rush. It was down to me, my father, and a handful of us when I begged anyone, anything to help us, and someone answered. I shot forth a ball of fire, and while the fire itself didn't do much, the ensuing rip in reality created a black hole and sucked all the gnolls in it," said Ebo. "Was it a wild surge?" Elune asked. "It was indeed. I've never gotten that effect to happen ever again in life, but every time I cast a spell, something happens that I don't expect." "So you're a priest that has wild surges?" Ebo nodded. "The only one I know of, too. So, to answer your question, I began to seek the source of this faceless god, to thank him in person, and the pursuit of the answer to a question that has never been answered is wildly fascinating."
I believe you didn't come to ask me that question specifically. It feels like an Arkin question to me. But that doesn't mean it wasn't a good question, which, if I'm going to be honest, it's a real conversation starter. So, why do you do it then?
Ebo redirected to the half-elf. I'm still trying to figure that out. It started with a need to not want to be home, said Alune.
Not as uncommon as you'd think.
Why'd you and Canydell? Alune spoke Canydell's name unsurely. Why did you stop and come back? Ebo thought for a moment, wondering if he should even say. But he felt that the reason they stopped adventuring was just as much his as it was Canydell's.
We are seekers, and we had been at it for a varied amount of years between the lot of us. I had been on the road for about 5 years before I met Canydell and Arkin, but we were on the road together about 2 years, give or take. I'll not get into Canydell's reason for seeking, because that part is his to tell, but the reason we paused belongs to us all. It was 6 of us at the apex of our travels. Tursk, Howler, and Nubian.
Ebo stopped to smile when he spoke their names out loud, as if he summoned their spirits to his side and was welcoming old friends to the campfire. He continued with a smile on his face.
Well, when you seek, chances are you will find nothing. We seek the answer to a question that none have definitively answered, so it's only logic that most of your time is spent in search of leads and legends that lead nowhere. You become adept at skulking around the deepest dungeons and fighting creatures so foul they never set foot into the light of day. We truly believed we were close to a lead that would shed light on the faceless god. It was a recently erupted valve that happened out in Molaren that we sought. We believe that the magical geysers that erupt throughout this planet is a clue to the faceless god's intentions.
And what are his intentions? Said Alune, skipping ahead slightly. Ebo smiled and shrugged.
No one really knows. So we ventured deep into the bowels of Everett, into this valve, and unlike when someone has the inclination to build a city over a valve, the deeper you go, the stronger the unpredictability of magic.
Ebo stopped a moment to marvel at the idea of all the potential of raw, untapped magic, then leveled himself and continued.
The deeper we ventured, the more magic grew unstable, but we found signs of life down in that crater. Life unlike what you or I may encounter or even understand. Half of us wanted to turn back, but Canydell was so confident we were onto something, he urged us forward. We lost Tursk, Howler, Nubian to a creature that shimmered with pure energy. We even lost Canydell, said Ebo.
You found a magic user powerful enough to return him. Ebo shook his head in the negative.
No, that's the thing. The valve itself brought him back. He was dead a day. Me and Arkin managed to lug 4 of our friends up the crater. At the end of the first day, light overtook Canydell's body, and he came back. No explanation.
That must have been a sign of your god, said Alune.
Which of course is what I told him, but he didn't see it that way. His guilt that he survived and the rest of our band died was so great he fell back on his family's profession and opened up a blacksmith shop.
And why did you stop?
Well, I was grieving, and I told myself the moment I was done, I was back on the road. But the months kept rolling on into years, and it started to become the thing I would do one day that I made excuses not to do anymore.
You're welcomed, came the soft voice of a barely conscious Arkin who was half listening to the dwarf's story.
Thank you, my friend,
Ebo said, not so stubborn he couldn't admit that he did in fact need that push to get him back on the road. And you never stopped. Alune said to Arkin, whose eyes were closed. He didn't answer immediately, which Alune took to mean that he had fallen asleep. No, I didn't. What else would I do? The dog folk said in an almost inaudible whisper. Suddenly, the speed of the river kicked up, and everyone rocked. Canydell and Arkin were jolted back to fully awake. Adorai, God of the Games, back in this piece. Join us next week for part 7, which will be the final of this particular chapter. Then a clear view is after this, and then I don't know what. Like and subscribe, or we ain't got shit to talk about. See you next week, maybe, or maybe not. Peace out.